Hello, this is John Carrington for Top of the Morning, and hey, Top of the Morning, we have a wonderful program for you today. We're here at J4P Associates, Model Property Owners, and you're going to find out a lot about what's going on in Baltimore, especially the East Side. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hello, John Carrington. I'm here at J4P Associates with Peter Handel, who is the president of J4P Associates.
Thank you, John. It's good to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. And congratulations on your award from the governor, Model Property Owner.
Isn't that nice?
Explain how that happened, sir.
Well, we at J4P try to be responsive, and so we look at our tenants as our customers, and so we want to give them what they need, what they want, and what they're due, and so that's the way we try to operate the business.
Well, you do a great job. You bring in some high-profile tenants too. The Baltimore City Department of Social Services.
Correct. Yes.
All right. And of course, you have a number of other.
The district court.
District court.
That's right. It's the busiest court in the state of Maryland.
All right. And of course, your goal is what for the long run? What's the
our goal? We view what we do here as a win-win-win. It's a win, we believe, for the communities because we have 1,400 state employees. We have 1,400,000 visitors to the complex in a year, and so that creates jobs and commerce and security, safety, and such. So it's a win for the neighborhoods. We view it as a win for the state because we provide what we think is really good facilities for the state, and it's a win for us because the state's a very good tenant to have. So our objective is to have a win-win-win for all concerned.
All right, and when are you going to start your West Side complex?
Well, we're working on other parts of North Avenue. So.
All right, so you're staying on the avenue.
Yeah, we're staying on the avenue. Yeah, we're East Baltimore types.
All right, what has been the highlight of your tenure?
Well, actually, it was last year when we celebrated our 25th anniversary. It really, all of a sudden, 25 years in East Baltimore. That was really, I mean, the time went so fast, and it's been a lot of fun. I think one of the highlights has been meeting the people in the community.
And the people who are here today, they're making
Absolutely.
all kinds of exciting noises and conversation right while we're sitting here.
This is our 8th Black History Month event, and we're really proud of the ones that we've had.
All righty. All right. And you seem so happy and contented. You must be married, and because guys who are married tend to live longer.
Well, thank you. I hope that's true. How about the guys that are happily married? Is that better or worse?
They live even longer.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, no, Pat is my partner here at the J4P complex, and she's been a major part of what we've done over the years, and she's working very assiduously with people in the community to try to do more things as well.
Okay, you're a model property owner. What advice do you have for other property owners in Baltimore City?
I think it's to create the win-win-win that I was talking about. Because if it's all about you, it's all about what you want, that doesn't work. You've got to look at it from the other person's point of view. You've got to see what is it that your tenants want, and to give that to them, and then everybody benefits.
All righty. Do you have any final thoughts, sir?
It's just a delight to be here for our 8th annual Black History Month event. I'm looking forward to the panel discussions. The whole idea of historically black colleges and universities is something that I've always been interested in. I went to Georgetown in Washington, and that's when I first became acquainted with Howard. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion today.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for your time, and remember, don't go anywhere because there's more coming.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. All right, I'm John Carrington here at J4P Associates, and we have Shirley Traub here. And Shirley is one of the people who works very closely with the program of real estate management with J4P Associates. So Shirley Traub, what is your experience with J4P Associates?
I'm general manager for J4P Associates. I help put on these events every year, which have been great. They're so informative. It's great to get the community involved, the people who work at the complex. It's been very rewarding.
And you recognize male and female contributors from the business community, from private sector. And that is so wonderful. And this is a very busy place. We have a lot of people coming in, and they're doing business, which is the whole thing that moves a city forward, business.
Yes.
And of course, you arrange the programs that recognize business people. All right, talk about some of your recent efforts.
Well, 2 years ago, we recognized Black small business owners. That was a great program. The year before, we did financial literacy for young people. Last year, we commemorated the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. And this year, we're going to talk about historically Black colleges and universities.
Beautiful. One year even had debates.
Oh, we did. We had a debate just recently in November.
Okay.
It was great. Middle schoolers.
You have any final thoughts for us?
We hope this will continue the great debate on this topic.
This is Dr. Richard Betts, and he is a communications faculty member at Towson University.
Right. I'm in Instructional Leadership and Professional Development Department, and I teach communication, and I teach communication for education majors.
Okay, so you're on the panel here at J4P Associates, and what exactly are you going to cover?
Well, we're going to talk about some of the problems of HBCUs in education, and we're going to talk about what we think are is the future of this, and what we think are some of the problems in the past, and talk about some of the colleges and universities that are doing well and some that are problematic, and graduation rates, and see if we can solve all the problems right here.
Well, that's wonderful. What's your position on the new digital age that's moving in on us here? Do people have to attend a college campus in order to get that education?
Well, it's interesting because I wrote an article in a University of Maryland magazine, and I've argued against online learning. So this is a little bit controversial, but I do not believe that online classes can compete with traditional classes. I think that there are manifest problems now. We now have some evidence showing that they are simply not as good, that you cannot make them secure, you cannot get the good classroom exchanges, that they're simply, online courses are simply not as good as traditional courses.
All right, in a way, I believe there's a social component to learning. We have a wonderful noise level here because there's so many people coming in, and we're having such a wonderful time discussing communications. In fact, while we're communicating, others are communicating.
I understand that.
But the real challenge is to realize that even 200 years ago, there were libraries. Just because you sat in the library around all those books didn't mean that you learned anything.
Well, that's right, and that's still the case. The fact that books do not give you information by osmosis. You actually have to read them.
Right.
And one of the problems with the internet is that people are reading less. But I've always found historically that in my classes, there's a category of what I call inveterate readers. These are people who everything they get a hold of, they read. They love to read. And these people, I can tell you over the decades, these people are more successful in their occupational lives than are people who are not like this. So you cannot replace reading with the internet, although there's reading in the internet, but you've got to read some books. So
the internet's sort of like sitting in a movie theater and just watching movies and expecting to come out with a college degree.
Well, that's right. That's an analogy that would have occurred to me, but I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. All right. So there ought to be some interaction between that instructor and the student, and also a vested interest in making sure that the learner is learning.
Well, that's right. I mean, with online classes, you simply, I tend to think that I have a class called Persuasion, and we have great, rollicking class conversations in that class. And I don't believe that you can possibly match that with an online course. You can give. It doesn't mean that you cannot bureaucratically give credit for it, but I don't think it's valid. I don't think you can do it. I think you're fooling people into believing that you can get 3 credits worth of learning from an online course when you simply cannot. It doesn't mean they have no value. It means they don't have value comparable to traditional courses.
Okay. All righty. Well, Dr. Richard Betts, well, I want to thank you. And I have with me Councilman Carl Stokes. How are you doing, sir?
Great, John. How are you today?
Just fine, just fine. I have one question. Money.
Uh-oh.
How are you and the members of the City Council working with J4P Associates in bringing more resources to Baltimore City?
Well, J4P has been wonderful over the last 20 years by taking what was formerly a Sears, the largest Sears building really in the country, largest window, showroom, et cetera, and they've been able to redo this wonderful campus, and it has brought to the district court, has brought the headquarters of the Baltimore District Department of Social Services, and some field offices here. And so about 1.25 million visitors come to this campus annually. They come here and they partake of the retail in the community, whether they're a grocery store that just opened recently, or the pharmacy or the eateries here. And so it has helped strengthen this little part of East Baltimore economically by taking this building, which was vacant and derelict, and spending millions of dollars to renovate it and to make it a vital part of the community again.
All right, well, you and the city council are certainly cheerleaders for Baltimore. What can the citizens do to help improve the community and support efforts like this?
Well, the citizens can, in many ways, stay home, so to speak, in terms of their dollars. Oftentimes, the dollars in a community float out, go somewhere else. But very recently, for example, a local family opened a wonderful grocery store right here in this community. And so it's just, its success can be measured by the local citizens, the neighbors who can walk to the store, coming to the store and not having to go beyond the neighborhood to buy healthy food, fresh food, good priced food, and by using other businesses that are in the community, the city neighbors are able to support the growth and the vitality of their own communities.
All right, sir, I'm with you on this page, man, and we need more taxpayers. Say something to our students who are in school right now.
Yeah, so
encourage them.
Encourage them, yes. Our students, who are wonderful, by the way, should know that there's a great opportunity in this city and this state and this region, but they have to make sure that they get their skills and that they prepare themselves, because the world has changed so greatly. There used to be a city where you could go to the steel mill, or you could go put a car together, and so much of that now is happening with robots or new technology. And so there are still a lot of jobs available for young people who have the skills and the new technology. And so I just encourage our students to stay in the school and to find something that interests you, that you like, that you enjoy, because there are so many different things really with this technology, and if they just follow a path of enjoyment, they'll find that it's not as hard a task as they may think if they go off in a direction that's not so interesting to them.
All right, well, you touched on the future. What initiatives do you have coming up that we need to know about? You want to tip anything here on Baltimore?
Well, I just find it very important to create as many positive opportunities for young people as possible. So in our communities, I'm very helpful and desirous of finding enough resources, money that is, so that young people, after their core school day, have other activities that they can do, such as the arts, such as music, such as scouting programs and technology programs and debating and chess programs. I think it's very critical that young people are occupied in positive ways in that time between 3 and 8 p.m. at evening. And to do that, to make sure that young people have an opportunity to do that, will greatly enhance their ability to be better the next day during their regular school hours. It will also greatly enhance the opportunity and the ability for them to stay away from danger. And so I think that's very important. Thanks everyone for coming. Good afternoon again. So this promises to be a really special conversation this particular morning here. This is the 8th annual Black History Month event. I'm Carl Stokes. I'm a consultant with J4P Associates. Let me just mention at the top that Pat and Peter Handel, the principals of J4P, are here. We'd like to thank them. They're very shy. Throughout the year, that J4P is very proud to be working with the Olivet community and the Middle East community and the other communities in around here, as well as many of our institutions. And I'll just mention that across the street, some of the best murals in the city have been there, I don't know, 20, 25 years now. And they're just fantastic murals, and they've been restored twice through the generosity of Pat and Peter Handel and J4P. So we thank them for their support of the community and the things they've done to just this campus we're on. Many of us old-time Baltimoreans remember Sears being on this particular. I know you're way too young, but this had the largest showroom of any Sears in the world, window, right here at the corner of North and Hartford, and then was empty and derelict for years before Pat and Peter came in and spent quite a bit of dollars to restore this property. So we're thankful for them. My job is more or less to get out of the way, and I'll let Bernard Jennings come up. And Bernard has been with J4P a number of years, a decade or so, I'm sure. And besides what he does professionally here, Bernard has an undergraduate degree from Morgan State University. He's representing here this afternoon in business and economics, and an MBA in marketing and international business for Columbia University. And in addition, in the corporate world, he's done a number of things with Anheuser-Busch companies as a vice president of Merrick's in St. Louis, Cleveland, LA. Currently, he is the founder and manager of the Capstone Consulting Group, LLC, where he also consults with higher education clients and a number of other things. Bernard has been a guest lecturer at a number of the universities and community colleges around the country. So we're glad and honored and happy he's a part of this great team at J4P, and Bernard will come forward now. Bernard.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 8th annual J4P Black History Month event. But I want to begin by thanking and introducing our distinguished panel who have taken their personal time to come and be a part of this. It could never be Black History Month without thinking of historically black colleges and universities. But it is the president of Coppin, Dr. Mortimer Newfield. Welcome, thank you very much. Sitting next to the president of Coppin is the secretary of the Maryland Higher Education Commission. You don't get much higher than that in the state of Maryland regarding education. Danette Howard, Dr. Danette Howard. Next is Delegate Aisha Braveboy, who's a candidate for the Attorney General for the state of Maryland. Ivory Tucker, who is a retired corporate executive from Northrop Grumman. He's also on the Morgan State University Foundation Board. He has been a loyal supporter of HBCUs in his professional life and personal life. Ivory, thank you. Welcome. Next to Ivory is Dr. Richard Vatz, a professor at Towson University, and very knowledgeable on the many subjects, and particularly leadership development. So Dr. Vatz, thank you very much for coming. But we're here today to have an intellectual exchange on HBCUs. Not so much the past, but where do we go from here, the future? We know how HBCUs began and why they began, so we won't dwell too much on that. But what I'd like to do is paint sort of a schematic, if you will, of yesterday and today as it relates to HBCUs. During the phases of racial segregation way back when, 150 years ago, it was necessary that for HBCUs to be created. That came with an opportunity for blacks to get educated at the college level. And with that, we had a talent pool nationally that HBCUs could draw from. And that thrived for a long time because segregation by law was banned, but in practicality was not functioning very well. We had the best and brightest students, we had the best and brightest professors, we had the best and brightest administrators, and God knows we had some great athletes. And that's what prevailed for quite a while. We fought hard as a race of people, and when I say we, only because I'm still proudly associated with Morgan, which is my HBCU undergraduate affiliation, and I worked there for 8 years as a VP for advancement. So excuse me as the independent moderator here, if I slip across that line every now and then, just please understand. But we fought and died for desegregation. And with that came sort of a breakup of the monopoly. And I will use from time to time business terms because that's my background. But as the monopoly disintegrated, white colleges began to go after African American students, professors, administrators, and big-time athletes. That then created a marketplace environment that was more competitive than historically it has been for HBCUs. So with that complex, sometimes uncomfortable realities, we're now in a situation where the model that HBCUs successfully created of nurturing and caring and making sure that our students graduated and went on to do good things is being adopted by white institutions. They're now starting to look at, well, we want more blacks, and they are attracting them. But with that comes, well, some operational models that say, we got to graduate them too. No longer can we stay at the top line of recruiting and say, okay, look, we're good stewards of society, we're educating African Americans. But now we're going to graduate them. So these things are all very complex. So fast forward to 2014, we are challenged in many ways as black schools with having to now go and fight a different battle with a different game plan. So the overarching thing today is, okay, let's talk about priorities, let's talk about what we might do. This is not a policy discussion, this is not a legal discussion, this is just a practical discussion of what can we do. Do we have some thoughts, some ideas, crazy or otherwise, that might be helpful as we go through the maze of competing in an open market? In the corporate world, you know, when the market is monopolistic, everything is fine too. But when things get a little different and you have to compete differently, then you have to change the way we do business or things don't go well in the future. So we have in front of us some brilliant people that will contribute in their own way to anything that they want to say about their particular institutions or about the overarching concerns that we have for making sure that our HBCUs are competitive, are successful, and doing things that we didn't do before. So I guess I'll start off with a general question to anybody on the panel, and that is, any priorities come to mind in terms of what you would like to see done in an ideal world that would benefit HBCUs?
Can we compete in the marketplace? Yes, we can, but for us to compete, I think it's important for us to have something of value. And what we have of value is a very, very supportive environment for the audience that we're trying to attract at our HBCUs. let's be realistic that we cannot compete financially with many of our competitors because the resources that they put on the table to attract our brightest and best, we cannot compete with them. But what most of our students need, or young people need, or African Americans in particular, is that nurturing environment. That environment that will ensure them some level of success. And I think that's what we have at Coppin. A nurturing, caring environment that can allow our students to compete. The problem that I see for many of our HBCUs is the fact that we have to demonstrate success through prescribed indicators. And these prescribed indicators, sometimes we're not able to measure up to them. For example, your 6-year or 4-year graduation rate. Many of our students entering are coming in underprepared. They're not unprepared, but they're underprepared. And they cannot compete because they're employed or they have other constraints. Many of them are parents. Many of them have other constraints that they have to live with. So therefore, we have to provide an environment for them. And it takes 6 years, 7 years, or 8 years. We are guaranteeing them some level of success. And that's a dilemma that we face. How do we prepare these students, enable them to graduate while meeting the indicators that are prescribed for us to be performers in this higher education environment?
So on a certain level, I agree with what the president has said, and as a proud graduate of an HBCU, I can attest to the fact that that nurturing environment does make a difference. However, I don't think that the nurturing environment alone is enough, because there are lots of institutions who are aggressively recruiting African American students, and they seek in some ways to replicate the nurturing environment that exists on some of our HBCUs. I was just in a conversation last week with some of the trustees from my alma mater, Howard University, and they actually referenced the Meyerhoff program at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And as many of you know, the Meyerhoff program started as one that enrolled African American males for careers in the sciences and mathematics. Had an incredible degree of success with that. Later enrolled women, and now is a diverse program. But they sought to replicate that nurturing environment, which many of our HBCUs are known for. So while I think that that continues to be a selling point for many of our institutions, the conversation can't start and end there. We have to be the best, most excellent institutions, such that when a student is considering making a college decision, they are saying, I have the choice between an excellent HBCU and an excellent campus that might be a PWI. There has to be something that speaks to the student and that will allow him or her to believe that they will have the most supportive experience, but also an experience that will allow them to go on and be competitive after they leave. And students want to get in and they want to get out as well. So we don't want our students just to enroll and stay there, or perhaps enroll and not graduate, but we also want our students to get the degrees that they seek. And I do think that many of our HBCUs need to grapple with all of these issues as we move forward. And it's not just our HBCUs, but other campuses as well are dealing with higher education changing at such a fast pace. When you look at the impact that technology has had on higher education, when you look at distance learning, when you look at the increased diversification of our campuses, these are issues that our HBCUs and, quite frankly, many of our other institutions did not have to deal with in years past. And so I firmly believe that our leaders really have to begin to grapple with these issues and have an understanding of how they can leverage them to move forward.
Before I say anything, I want to say hello to Bernard and Anthony McCarthy and Carl Stokes, who I know, I've known for a long time, and I admire all of them very much, and it's good to be here with you. And also I want to say that I'm a bit of a token on this panel because I'm conservative. In any case, I can talk about one of the points that I thought that Dr. Howard made that is so critical, and that is the tremendous attention and the value of attention universities give to their students. At Towson, we have a SAGE program, Students Achieving Goals Through Education. It's a diverse group of people. We have mentoring, we have counseling. There is so much attention given to students throughout their matriculation at Towson University. I mean, I'm a full professor, and I do a lot of publishing, and some of you know that I do a lot of media work. But I've spent a tremendous amount of time. I've been at Towson almost 40 years, and I've spent a tremendous amount of time with students. And when students, and this sounds like a little thing, when students email me, if I'm on email, which I usually am, unfortunately, they'll get a response within minutes. I mean, they get quick responses. They are a top priority. There's a faculty member in Washington who does a lot of media, and the students were all complaining that they'll email him and he won't get back to them for weeks. And at Towson, I get back to them in minutes. I mean, they are my top priority. I do a lot of stuff, but they are my top priority. And students know at Towson that we pay a tremendous amount of attention to them. And as such, the graduation rates for minority students and the graduation rates for white students is identical. Statistically, there's no difference. And I think it's because students know that they are our number one priority throughout. They are always our number one priority. And they also, in a general sense, when you talk to faculty at Towson, you know that teaching, whatever else they do, teaching is their number one priority, and students are the number one priority. It doesn't mean that we give them a pass. I mean, I'm kind of known that when a student says to me, can I do something for extra credit? My answer is no. I don't give extra credit. You know, we have assignments, and you do the assignments. But I spend a tremendous amount of time with students. Whenever students want to talk to me, they can talk to me. And students are our number one priority, and it pays off, and you can see it in the graduation rates of black students, graduation rates of white students.
Dr. Batts, quick question in response to what you just said. Might some of that be because Towson aggressively goes after some of the best and brightest students? Would that be a part of it, whereby in the case of Coppin, they are going more into the broader African American community where there is a need and they're trying to address the need, so the data that you're communicating might be offset by the mission of Coppin? And that's a question, that's not, you know.
Well, let me respond to that. I think there's something to what you say. I don't think it accounts for the difference between a 67% graduation rate and a 15% graduation rate. I think that there is that, but Towson pays a tremendous amount of attention to all of its students, and I think that's the difference. Do we begin with a different population of students? To some degree, but that doesn't account for the tremendous disparity in graduation rates.
May I?
Absolutely.
Would you agree that we're not on a level playing field? Because not only are we getting the best of the best, but we also have more resources to provide additional support. So clearly the results, one would think, would be better because of a combination of things. So I certainly don't mean to cast any dispersions on the success. I do suggest, though, however, I remember a friend of mine who was a professor at Medgar Evers, and I was lecturing to a group of the faculty, and one of the things they said to me, coming from corporate America, one of the things they said to me, well, Ivor, you know, if I got the same kids that Harvard got, I could produce doctors and lawyers also. So there is a difference. I would beg to differ, though, that if we were on a level playing field, would that much of a difference exist? So when you take into consideration the fact that we not only have a differences in the best of the best going to these institutions, but also you're providing more and broader resources and support because you have the financials to do so. It just contributes to that difference. Now, having said that, I don't mean to offer that as an excuse. I just offer it as something that no different than the HBCUs have always had to deal with. They've always had less and always had to do with less in order to compete and be equal. Now, clearly we have demonstrated, we've gone from, as Mr. Jennings said, a sole source environment. We all know about sole source. I grew up in the competitive world and corporate America, and sole source is, when you're sole source, you get you have a deal, you have a project, you have access, you have control, and so you're usually pretty successful. Competition comes along, and usually you have to reinvent yourself, or you have to do things differently. And going through that reinvention process, after you've been had a sole source for, 130 years, if not 150, you now go through an evolution as to how you get to the point where you're now offering a product of equal value and a product where you can ultimately continue to compete on an equal basis. Now, I think, though, that where we are, and I think that was one of your questions, where we are is that we've looked at our model, and we've seen that the PWIs have adopted our model. I'm not saying we invented it, but certainly it was the model that many of us came through. They've adopted it and have more resources to produce it and encourage it. So now that says we've got to do something different. We must now look internally. We must reinvent ourselves and figure out how do we offset that. And I think that's the transition that we're going through. By no means do I think that the disparity that you referenced today will be the same 10 years or 20 years from today. I think that as we go through this evolution process, go through the reinvention of the HBCUs, re-identify those things that we need to do to address the issues that we all are aware of, I think that we will ultimately be able to provide that service. So we're trying to put a stake in the ground to say today that there's this vast difference, and it is, but it didn't just get there. It's been evolving over a while, and I think that it will take time for us to figure this out and make the necessary adjustments so that we can compete. Now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just say this, while going through that, I do think, though, that it's important that we understand what some of the potential misfits are. I'm glad you cited the graduation rate, because most schools cite the enrollment rate. We seldom get to really understand what the graduation rate is among PWIs, because they don't necessarily want you to know what that is. I have yet to see what that is among minorities at the PWIs. And maybe you guys have, I just haven't. In fact, there's a recent book on the subject called Mismatch, which in essence suggests, and I'm going to make one more statement and I'll be quiet, which in essence suggests that a kid getting an offer from Towson or from University of Maryland and an offer from Morgan or Coppin, what does his family want to do? Everybody think that even though that kid's SATs may have been 1150 and Towson or others have made adjustments to try to accommodate it because of their support systems, what we're finding is, while Towson does a great job, I can't get those stats out of North Carolina or out of Duke or out of UCLA or out of some of the other schools, Alabama. And that's because while there may be advantages you get through enrollment, they still ultimately teach that class at the level of the majority of those kids. And so a lot of students get in trouble. And when you talk to community colleges, one of the things you'll find is one of their largest enrollments coming into the second semester are kids returning from some of these PWIs that have got into trouble. So I cast no dispersion. I'm just saying we need to look at the facts and say, these are some of the facts. Now, what do we have to do to improve the value package at the HBCUs?
Thank you. Secretary Howard mentioned, and I'll paraphrase what she said, other things are happening. And are we moving our HBCUs in a competitive way towards that? And if not, what can we do to try to accelerate that? Because you look around, and diversity was a hue and cry for HBCUs years ago, and it was a black-white thing. And now diversity means so much more. And are we, any thoughts on how we can better accelerate how we respond to the forces of the marketplace? The marketplace demands are totally different, and we've got to compete in that marketplace. We cannot change that.
It's just an honor to be here, so thank you so much for the invitation. I wanted to, and I'm so happy you asked the question, because the reality is, in the state of Maryland, I'm not going to talk about each HBCUs broadly. I'm going to talk about the ones here in our state, because those are the ones that we're responsible for. We have 4 HBCUs. They're all wonderful institutions that really can be a whole lot better if the state steps up and takes responsibility for equality and parity of funding for our institutions. Really the only real way to compete is to have competitive programs that students want to become a part of. If you have the option of going to a university that has new facilities, that have full-time professors, that have upgraded technology, versus a campus that has facilities that are not modern, that don't have the sort of the capacity to facilitate some of the upgrades in technology that we all know is extremely important to prepare our young people to work in the jobs of the future in those STEM fields, then a competitive student, a student who has done well, who tested well, who's done well in school, they're most likely going to opt to go to the campus that's going to provide them with more resources. It is what it is. If you're in demand, so if you're an African American student who's in demand, meaning you've done well in school, you've got good grades, you've done well on your SATs and other standardized tests, schools are going to flock to you, and you're going to have your choice of institutions. And the question is, what is going to be important to you? And certainly, I think being in an environment that will foster, a highly competitive environment is where you're going to opt to go to. And so what the state has not done is really made the investments in the historically black colleges and universities so that they can be competitive for those students also. Every report that the state has issued or has authored since 1963 has indicated that the state underfunded purposefully HBCUs. And that has led to many issues, including the facilities that are not as modern as the facilities at predominantly white institutions. It's led to, low numbers of full-time faculty, and the professor at the end mentioned how great it is that he gets to get back to his students right away when they have a question or when they need to see them. But if you have a large number of adjunct professors on your campus, they may be wonderful professors, but by virtue of them being adjunct, they're not there full-time. They have other responsibilities. And so the students don't have the same interaction with their professors as they would if they were at a predominantly white institution. If you look at housing is one of the greatest indicators of whether or not you're going to have a high graduation rate, like 5-year, I guess, as they measure it, 5-year graduation rate. At the HBCUs, most of the campuses are struggling with the issue of on-campus housing for their students. So there are a number of issues. I'm not making excuses, but there are a number of factors that the state has to take responsibility for because the state created these conditions at these state institutions. The reason why it's so critical for us now to invest financially and have a dedicated funding into our HBCUs is because the HBCUs outperform predominantly white institutions when it comes to producing African Americans in the STEM fields. Why is that important to Maryland? Well, Maryland wants to be a leader in cyber technology. Maryland wants to be a leader in biotechnology. Maryland wants to be a leader in healthcare and healthcare management. But there is a changing demographic in Maryland. Maryland is now close to 50%. At the last census in 2011, when the census numbers were reported, Maryland was 45% minority. 30% of the individuals living in the state are black. And so creating environments where minority students are excelling and achieving in critical fields of the future is very important to Maryland. Because if we're not building that workforce here, those companies are going to go somewhere else. So Maryland has to really take a look inward and say, you know what, where are we headed? Are we headed, are we really serious about being this technology leader? If we are, we've got to invest, not in every institution, but specifically we need to make the investment that we didn't make years ago in our HBCUs, because they are producing engineers. I mean, Morgan produces more blacks overall in engineering than just about any other institution in the country. That's significant. That means we have a huge workforce that we can get right here in Maryland in critical fields. But if we don't recognize, if Maryland doesn't recognize by its pocketbook, not just by talking, Maryland doesn't recognize the importance of our HBCUs, how critical it is, not just to the future of the students who go there, but to Maryland's future, we're never going to get where we need to be. But I think but this year we have a bill to address that issue, and I'm hopeful that it'll spark more of these type of dialogues.
Thank you. Generally, let's go back to my comment about the complexities of the uncomfortable realities, okay, the uncomfortable realities. How fast can we get funding to do anything? What's the operational process to get the funds into the system and the schools built and the buildings built and all of that stuff? It might be kind of tough. But Dr. Vance.
The sociology of a university determines the greatness of its students, the greatness of its faculty. If you were to walk, Towson's a university I know best. I mean, I'm involved with a lot of universities nationwide. I'm on my National Communication Association, Legislative Assembly, and so on. But if you were to walk through Towson University on any given day, you would see one of those vibrant universities, and walk through our student union. You would see people whites, people of color interacting all the time. There is this tremendous energy, this tremendous love for the university, this tremendous love. And I think it also, and this is not to deny your point, the parenthetical point about the increase of adjuncts and the ancillary effects that has. That's absolutely true. But I'm saying that when you have a vibrant sociology that pertains to the social and academic needs and excellence of students, you really see why Towson is doing so well in terms of its graduation rate. And I suggest there are differences among the HBCUs in Maryland. I mean, when you have Bowie, which has a 40% graduation rate, UMES, which has a 31% graduation rate, Morgan has a 28% graduation rate, and Kaufman has a 15% graduation rate. These are differences that there's just an enormous effect of the sociology of the institution. When I talk about professors and their reaction to students, that's part of the sociology of the institution. And money, and we have some disagreements about the money situation, but let's say you're correct 100% about the money situation. The money situation does not account for the sociology of the university. And the sociology of the university is going to tell you whether students, all students, are looked at as a critical element of the university, whether minority students are attended to and their needs are attended to significantly. And unless you have a good sociology, and some schools have a great sociology, Towson has a great sociology. Florida State, at which the graduation rate of minority students is above that of white students. They have a very strong sociology. So I'm just saying that's a major, and it's not to deny anything you're saying, because I don't disagree, I disagree with some of the factual points, but I don't disagree majorly with what you're saying. But I'm just saying that you've got to have a sociology that encourages all students to do their best academically and to advance academically. And Georgia Tech is another university that has a great sociology and has great performance.
Dr. Batts, are you saying sociology and operational efficiency in the same way here, or is that?
I think operational efficiency is part of sociology. But sociology deals with all of the norms, all the interactions, you could just see, I know I'm sounding like I'm giving an advertisement.
I think I need to respond to that, because I could contradict you on several fronts. If I had your student profile and the resources that you have, I would have an equivalent graduation rate. Because I think it's ridiculous to compare your graduation rate and say that Coppin is underperforming, and that's essentially what you're saying. And I really disagree with you. Our student profile is so much different from yours.
I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
We are graduating, let's say 500 students per year. Less than 60% of those students count towards our graduation rate. Because these students are part-time students coming in, they are 28 years old of age, and many of them are not counted towards our graduation rate. So I think what you're saying is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, we'll go to Dr. Howard, but
Yes.
then that poses what is going on between the President of Coppin and Dr. Batts tends to lead me to my corporate thinking of brand and image and mission.
I try to bring some centering to the two major points that we've heard here. And I don't necessarily wholly disagree with anything that I've heard thus far. To the delegate's point, certainly more could be done with more funding. I don't know of a college president in the country who would say that he or she couldn't use more funding and couldn't do more with more funding. But I don't think that funding alone is the answer, and I think perhaps that's the point that the professor was trying to make. So I'm going to go back to my former life when I was a higher education researcher, and I want to commend to all of you a website, and its name is collegeresults.org, and I wish I could do a live demo here for you. What collegeresults.org does is classify similar institutions who are alike on a number of fronts, including the types of students that they admit, the scores of those students, funding per student, faculty, percent of adjunct faculty, percent of low-income students, and then it classifies those institutions based upon graduation rates and student outcomes. So you can't say, well, you can't compare Towson to Coppin because Towson and Coppin are completely different. And you can't say, well, you can't compare Morgan to College Park because they're completely different. But when you're looking at institutions that are alike on a number of measures, for example, all HBCUs, and you see that there's a range of graduation rates even among those institutions that have similar funding, similar students, similar faculty, it's very difficult to say it's all about funding. Because sometimes you see a 30 percentage point spread in graduation rates across those institutions that are very much alike. And so to the professor's point, it's not all about the faculty, but institutions themselves play a hugely important role in the outcomes of students. I can share examples of institutions that we found when I was at the Education Trust. Elizabeth City State in North Carolina is an HBCU. When you compare it to other HBCUs, its graduation rates are off the chart. What are they doing that's so different? Miles College, another small private HBCU, their graduation rates were close to 70%, unheard of among HBCUs. What are they doing differently? So I will never say that any college couldn't use more funding and couldn't do better by its students if it had more funding, but funding alone is not the issue. Let's look to those institutions that are succeeding. Let's compare them to institutions that are very much like it, and let's see what we can do and how we can produce some better outcomes for our students.
So that data that you're referring to,
Yeah.
is that the starting of a thought process that says maybe we classify colleges differently, and maybe we restructure missions differently. Right now, I think the perception is in Maryland that an HBCU is an HBCU.
Yeah.
And nationally, same thing.
Well,
Maybe that's not right.
Well, I think that it's an important starting point for a conversation like this, because all of the points here are relevant, and you can say that they all have validity. I think, Dr. Newfield has made some good points that you can't compare Coppin to Towson, but are there other universities that we could be comparing Coppin to? Perhaps. Are there other universities that we could be comparing Towson to? Perhaps. Is it unusual for any university, Towson or otherwise, to have no graduation rate gap between its white students and black students? Yes, it is. So we can't dismiss or discount that just because it's Towson. So I always believe that starting with data to provide an objective lens to the conversation is a good place to start.
Yeah, but here's why funding is so important. And I don't think anyone should underestimate the importance of funding. Because in order for Dr. Newville to attract a different student profile that might lead to different student outcomes, he's going to have a facility, he's going to have faculty, he's going to have programs that are competitive enough for students who are maybe higher achieving students to want to attend that university. So I think funding is extremely important. And if you look just historically, and to the professor's point, in recent years, the state of Maryland has created a different funding formula that has provided more equity amongst universities. But historically, I don't think anyone can deny this, the historically black colleges and universities have been underfunded. And the level of funding that has, the increases that have occurred has not really offset the historic underfunding that Maryland allowed to occur for our historically black colleges and universities. And I don't believe that we would be intellectually honest with ourselves if we don't acknowledge the importance of funding, of having facilities that are attractive to students, being able to attract top-notch, professors and researchers, being able to provide an environment for the students, like student activity centers and dining halls that students are excited about going to. I don't think anyone of us up here can really say that creating a better environment on campus, the facilities on the campus, the number of full-time professors on a campus is not going to have a direct relationship to the success of the students on that campus. So I just wanted to make that.
And I just have one short rebuttal, and I think this is where the delegate and I differ. The focus of her comments has been if the HBIs are to attract a different profile of students. And my comments are based upon, given the students that our campuses have now, when you look across this range of campuses that have similar students, there is a range in terms of success. And so that's just kind of the perspective that I'd like to bring. And I don't disagree that all of our campuses could use new facilities, and all of our campuses, including our HBIs, can point to in recent years, and I'm not going historically back, but in recent years, many of our campuses have had new facilities that can begin to lead to attracting more of those students, as I think the point is.
Are we more segregated now on our African American college campuses than our white counterparts? And if so, how do we explain that? How do we market that? Because other campuses are more diverse than our HBCUs, that's just racially diverse. We are still fighting that battle of trying to educate people, but at the same time, we're focusing our marketing efforts on educating black people. And we can answer that in a minute, but Dr. Newman, please.
I'm going to answer your question. I'm also going to answer your question with another question, okay? My answer to your question is, yes, some of our campuses are more segregated than we were years ago. And my question to your question is, I've asked the question of my folks at Coppin, why is it that after 40 years, we are still talking about first-generation college students? it's amazing that when I went to school back in the 60s, I was a first-generation college student. And today, African Americans are still talking about first-generation college students. So we are the second and third generation African American college students.
And I think it goes to the point that the delegate is making, and I'm not sure if the data that's being cited is that they're going where the better facility, where the better opportunities lie in the categories. And so what you find is that first, those of us that were first generation, we were part of came through at a time when the opportunities were limited as to where we went to school. So we went where we could go. Today, you have the PWIs reaching out and doing a great job of recruiting and bringing on board the best of the best, and even the next level down perhaps. So I think we kind of know what's happening. The question is why? And you can't, in spite of the fact that all of the answers are not around economics. You know, when I was at Morgan, Towson was a little school down the street. But certainly I think we'll all agree that they received an enormous amount of funding beyond that which Morgan got. And so economics was the direct relationship between the growth and success at Towson versus a Morgan, a Bowie, and a Coppin. Now, is it just economics? I'm sure it's just not economics. But that's just one point to address the economics. As it relates to the data that's being cited around the table, growing up in corporate America, man, we can make the data say whatever we want it to say. How many students at Towson or at University of Maryland, minority students, are also working full-time jobs, also having other responsibilities? The fact of the matter is, Towson and or Maryland may not even accept that kid or that young person. We make those accommodations to accept those individuals at a price. And part of that price is graduation rate. But yet you cite graduation rate as the criteria to determine as to whether we are doing a good job or not. But that's okay, that's not uncommon, because the rules have always been different when it came to applying the data to HBCUs or to society as a whole when it comes to minorities in the manner in which they go about addressing their business. So yeah, we can cite the data. I've used data in many ways, and I know that in academia, data is critical. I mean, data is critical to research. But there was also some data that the delegate cited, and she talked about STEM PhDs in this country. The majority of African American STEM PhDs in this country comes from HBCUs. And that's a piece of data. I just read that in history. I think, do you agree with that, sir? So then, what are we doing with less? And yeah, where do they go to get that PhD? Often to the PWI. But the HBCUs must be doing something right if they're taking those kids that come on board less prepared and wind up getting PhDs at the HBI, at the PWIs. Now, that's data, and one could argue that they're doing a great job with the limited resources. But that's not the data that you choose to use to measure the success or failures of the HBCUs. You choose to use data that, when you peel the onion back, you can look at what some of the differences are, but that's not what we get. We just get the data about the graduation rate, not the fact that it's a mom who's working and got a kid at home, or the fact that, that's a dad who's working full-time and going to school part-time and graduation rate is 6 or 7 years. That doesn't get applied in the data. So I question the data. It's not that the data is inaccurate, it's how you use the data. And that's the point, my concern about using data in this forum to apply across the board with graduation rates.
We'll go to Dr. Batson.
But I just wanted to associate my point of view what Dr. Howard was saying, and even though she claimed that she was in the middle of 2 points of view, I found everything she said to be really consistent with what I've said. And I do believe that you need to look, if you find comparisons with traditionally white institutions, an unfair comparison, the easy answer is to look within HBCUs. And when you find the tremendous disparities, not just among graduation rates, but within the on-campus vibrancy and opportunity that are available to African American students, when you find within those institutions these tremendous differences, you can't just look at money. You've got to ask, what are the differences among these universities that account for these significant disparities among these similar institutions?
In corporate America, oftentimes when you have problems in the marketplace, you become more efficient through different means in order to address those challenges. We've read a lot about program duplication, the fights between Morgan and Towson, and Morgan and UMBC, and Morgan and UBalt, etc. What about program duplication at the HBCUs right here in Baltimore and in the state of Maryland? Has anyone thought about consolidating some of the programs, merging the schools? Other tough measures that have to be addressed. It doesn't mean that they need to be done blindly without forethought, research, etc. But what are some of the efficiency measures that we could, should, and probably undertake?
That's an interesting question, because the issues that you raise when it speaks to efficiencies, and you speak to some of the solutions to that efficiency issue, whether we agree or not, it's a direct correlation and result of economics. We do not suggest that when it comes to the other schools, the PWIs, because they are receiving the economics and the funding that allow them to be sufficient, that allow them to do the things that they need to do. So when one of the things, when we look at mergers and acquisitions, and by the way, I grew up in the merger and acquisition business.
That's why I asked the question before you spoke.
One of the things we found with all of those mergers and acquisitions, it usually was because someone was not achieving their P&L, or someone's market or product was not doing or generating the kind of returns that it needed to generate. So, and that's usually was a result of competition, or a result of not having reinvented themselves, or not having come up with new technology within a reasonable time frame. But the common denominator always was economics, and who had the deepest pockets, and who had the most access to the greater resources. So when we talk about combining, and I think what you're referring to, and I apologize if I misread it, when we talk about combining the HBCUs so that they become more efficient and making themselves and reducing certain over duplications.
By the way, I'm not implying anything but a general question, and don't touch the funding.
No. And listen. That logic says we should be thinking like that. So I'm not, criticizing the question. Logic says, what are some of the potential solutions? And when you go down the list of potential solutions, you can't help but think of that as a potential solution. But as the delegate said, if the HBCUs have been funded as they should have been over the past 20 years, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So what you're doing is you're taking the results of what has happened in the marketplace in Maryland over the past 20 years and saying, okay, this is where you are now. No matter how you got here, this is where you are. So now you have to figure out how to survive, and the way you survive is by perhaps looking at potential mergers and acquisitions or whatever. But we overlook how we got there, and I'm not convinced you can continue to do that. I think you're going to have to figure out how to balance the playing field. Now, the delegate referenced the imbalance and the bill that's pending before the legislature, and I think it's called Tell me the name of the bill again, Doug?
HBCU parity and investment.
Yeah, HBCU parity and investment. They're saying, it's very clear that we have not received certain amount of monies. Give us the monies and we can compete. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
I have faced this question of merger many times. And I remember when I was on the Eastern Shore, the question of merger came up between Salisbury and UMES. And my reaction was always, yes, I'm very, very supportive of the merger, if you'll consider merging Salisbury into UMES. And immediately the argument stops.
Of course not.
So my question is, to what extent do we consider mergers of the TWIs?
Well, what about mergers of the HBCUs?
In terms of funding, everybody's going to complain about funding. You make a very good point. Every president's going to say they need more money. UMBC is saying it doesn't get as much as College Park. Towson's saying they don't get as much as UMBC. Yeah, they're going to continue to do that. Funding for capital projects, for building and the facilities, it's going to take 5 or 7 years before you even put a shovel in the ground for that. So you can argue that point all you want. But that still doesn't help students today. So my question is two-part. One, funding. How can you use funding to help students today? Because when you talk about a Coppin State where 62% of its students are eligible for Pell Grants, a building is not going to help them finish. And two, graduation rates, you're talking about that, everyone agrees it's not the same. So what is the proper measure of success?
That question, and I guess I'll use your question to respond a little bit about the use of graduation rates as the data point. And I think that graduation rates is typically the first thing that people talk about because everyone has a common understanding of graduation rates, but no responsible researcher would begin and end a conversation about student success with graduation rates, right? And so in my own work, I've used a lot of different indicators to discuss equity, student achievement, and student success. So one thing that we might look at is not how many students are finishing within 6 years, but are students making progress? I mean, we just want to see progress from one year to the next. We know that in order for a student to move to being a sophomore from a freshman, they have to get over that 30 credit threshold. Are they gaining 30 credits within the first year or year and a half? Are they getting 60 credits within the first 2 or 2.5 years? We also know that at our HBCUs in particular, students who transfer in are very successful. They have a higher completion rate than native students. So why is it that students who transfer in are more successful? Should we be looking at transfer rates? In terms of financial aid, I actually think we need to completely, to borrow your term, reinvent our financial aid system. Right now we have a statewide financial aid program, and for our lowest income students, we provide a full grant that covers tuition, fees, room, and board. But we never know how many of those students are successful. So if funding is really the issue, and we give students a full financial aid program, why aren't more of those students successful? And many of them are not. So I'd like to see some type of incentive program, whereby if we give a student a full financial aid award, and they transition from being a freshman to sophomore, then we give them another incentive. Maybe we decrease their tuition by a certain amount. So we are incentivizing progress and completion instead of simply providing the funding and there's no relationship to success in the funding. Those are just some of my thoughts.
Okay, Judge Holt and then Mr. March.
You know, I'm listening to the conversation and I have a lot of thoughts, but one thing I do want to say is we have to look at the students who are coming into the colleges.
We attempted to do today, at least start thinking about solving it. Thank you all very much. Now, Peter, please. And lunch will be provided across the hall.
Thank you, Bernard. And thank you, everybody, for coming. On behalf of my wife, Pat, and myself, I think this was absolutely phenomenal. It really was. I mean, this is, as you know, from what Bernard said, the 8th Black History Month event that we've had. And I'm familiar with Dale Carnegie, and he said about the way to disagree is to disagree agreeably. And I think we sure saw a lot of that today, and I think that was terrific. So thank you for the participants. It was really, the panelists were really, it was very, very interesting and very helpful. Thank you all for coming, and let's have lunch.
Here, we have with us Mr. Ivory Tucker, who is the one of the foundation members for Morgan State University. And sir, I'm just so proud to have you here. You're a retired businessman.
Yeah. A few years ago, I retired from corporate America, the executive staff over at Northrop Grumman Corporation. I have actually been active at Morgan State University now for maybe about 10, 12 years. I've been on the board about 6, 7 years. And by the way, I am here in my individual capacity. I make no reference that I'm representing the university's position. But this is a subject very dear to me. I have spent a lot of time with Mr. Jennings debating some of the pros and cons, strengths, weaknesses, and challenges, and look forward to participating today.
All right, where is America going business-wise? Are we going to be making less things here and doing more intellectual property sort of things, or where are we going with our future in the business arena?
Actually, I'm quite bullish on America's future and its growth. I think that we're beginning to see some trends changing from that which we had more manufacturing leaving the country to now more manufacturing coming back to the country for various reasons. One, it's getting to be fairly expensive abroad to manufacture product, not only in cost of labor, but in cost of energy. And as a result of that, when you factor in all of the costs associated with taking technology abroad, manufacturing it abroad, the costs of production abroad, and then transporting it back to the U.S., it's not that much different as much as it used to be. And what has happened is some of these third world nations have matured, become more sophisticated in their manufacturing, in their technology, in their education. They too have increased the cost of living. It's just kind of a natural phenomena, and we do a pretty good job of being very competitive in this country, and I'm bullish on the future of America, not only just in manufacturing, but certainly we have historically had a tremendous advantage technologically, and I expect that to continue.
All right, I love it. You know, the high-tech areas like the space program, you know, the government's getting out of that, and more of the private sector, Northrop Grumman and companies are attempting to do things that before the government just had privacy and control over. Where do you see that program going now?
Well, it's like anything else, you know. I'm not sure if a lot of people really realize, but a lot of our technology in this country evolves out of the government. I mean, our whole computer system, the internet, evolved out of technology in the government, Department of Defense. And now look at it. They took it and made a commercial product out of it, a commercial technology, and wow, it's practically controlling the world, you know, in our information technology. So I don't see any real changes there. I think that the federal government has reached a point that they have evolved their technology to a point that they can now transfer some of that technology to the commercial arena. And the commercial arena have a way of doing things in a more aggressive, competitive, efficient manner. And so I think that only the sky is the limit with some of the future, with our future in the area, in the space community.
We want to make sure that some of our wannabe businessmen get some good advice and tips from you. What do you have to say to them?
Well, you know, it's interesting because my dad was an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur wannabe. And somehow I found my way into corporate America as a result of my educational background. And then once I got there, things kind of worked out for me, so I remained there. But clearly, the future, especially in the minority community, is for those of us who do have certain expertise to invest and reinvest in the minority community, because it is only with individuals taking their knowledge, their experience, their wisdoms, and bringing it back into the minority community will we be able to return to that which we once had.
That's right.
One of the great things about integration was that we had the opportunity to move around a little bit more and get involved in more things. One of the downsides was that it destroyed the economy in the black community. And I think that there's an opportunity to revisit that, and I see more and more young people, young entrepreneurs doing just that. So I'm encouraged about the future of entrepreneurs, especially minority entrepreneurs in the minority communities.
All right, Avery Tucker, retired businessman, and do you have any final thoughts?
Well, as it relates to corporate America and the subject that we're here to discuss today, which is the future of historical black colleges and universities, one of the things I always struggled with was that I always considered education a business. And I'm not sure if educators always viewed education as a business. Academia was always kind of different. And clearly, there are different models, but I do believe that just as corporations have to reinvent themselves from time to time, I think in academia, we perhaps should be evaluating and looking at some of those processes that we see others go through when they are challenged in the competitive market arena. Because competition is the name of the game. Certainly HBCUs are experiencing a lot of competition now. So it begs the question, how are they going to reinvent themselves so that they can continue to offer value? And I think that's where we are in trying to come to grips with the future of HBCUs in America.
All right, well, we had sound advice from Avery Tucker, a retired businessman here at J4P Associates. J4P Associates is doing a wonderful panel discussion on communications and helping us during Black History Month. So again, I want to thank you, Avery Tucker. We're here at J4P Associates, and I have with me Dr. Genevieve Knight, who is a PhD in math and mathematics, and this is wonderful. It's one of my favorite subjects now that I've been forced to pass a statistics course in grad school.
Yeah, I know. We were talking about statistics. Yes.
So what, you on the panel today?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I just came because I'm interested. I'm originally from Brunswick, Georgia.
Okay.
And I went to a historical black college for my undergraduate.
Okay.
And also for my graduate degree. And but I see a close connection with the land grant movement. And Abraham Lincoln says in 1862, when the Mirror Acts went on, that we got to do something about the health and the wealth of the nation. And so what we want to do is provide something so that our young men, and he was talking about white young men, could get educated in agriculture and that kind of thing. Lo and behold, when the first Mirror Acts, I guess it was one, was passed, they discovered in some states like Missouri and Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, even though they had a land grant college, black folks couldn't, black men couldn't go there. Now, there are some states with two, and there are some states with one. And you can almost point out where the states that there are two. Yes, indeed. I think Alabama is the only one that has three, but Tuskegee is an institution, but Tuskegee just happened to be private. And the so-called first historically black college was at Lincoln, and it was founded in 1854. And that was before the Mirror Act. And I think 1971 they became a state institution in Pennsylvania.
What has been Georgia's take on bringing those same programs into urban areas where a majority of low-income people live?
Well, the education has been limited because somebody told minorities, especially blacks, that you don't want to wear overalls and you don't want to be like that. But you know what? The nation that controls the food cycle and the clean water will control the world.
All right.
Now look at what's happening in California now and all these things and so forth. But there are a lot of historically black land grant colleges where they have, I can talk about my school. They had this man, he came from New York, I think
Okay.
Edward. Forgot his, anyhow, I can't remember.
I can cut that out.
Okay.
Okay, and he came, and he said, we're not gonna have teacher education, we're not gonna have all this. He didn't know the history.
He didn't understand.
The land-grant colleges got their own budget. Now, Fort Valley sits in Peach County. There are a lot of black farmers, there are a lot of white farmers. I said, wait a minute now, all we wanna do is to make money. The richest people in the world are from the farm, from the bread basket.
That's
They're
right.
not in New York, they're
That's
not
right.
on Wall Street. The richest people sitting out there in Nebraska and places like that. Well, I think that some of the historic black colleges missed the boat
That's right.
when time changes because they don't understand where they came from. They were created to fill that. Let's look at the first one, was 1863. Where were the black men going? So there were people in churches, and there were people who had a whole lot of money. And so the white man who had all this money said, wait a minute, if I can educate this, I can keep it right, you just said it, I can right in my county, I'm gonna get the money.
Well, I want to thank you for giving us the historical perspective on what happened with land-grant universities, especially when they created two of them, one for the minority and one for the majority, but it also resulted in a whole lot of people being able to benefit from
That's right.
agriculture in
That's right.
America.
That's
And I want to
right.
thank you for being a part of this Black History panel here at J4P Associates. This is Dr. Genevieve Knight, and she's a wonderful resource for the history of the land-grant colleges and universities. Thank